did you do? Not pay parking tickets?
Oh, no. I was convicted of murdering my husband.
There are actors who arrive at exactly the right moment, with exactly the kind of presence a decade seems to fall for, and still somehow stop fitting the system that once seemed made for them. Ashley Judd was one of the biggest female stars of the late 1990s. Kiss the Girls and Double Jeopardy made serious money. And then the roles shifted, the rhythm changed, and a career that seemed aimed at the very top moved somewhere else entirely. So what actually happened? Let's peel it back. Ashley Tyler Simonella, known professionally as Ashley Judd, was born in 1968 in Granada Hills, California. Her mother was Naomi Judd. Her half-sister was Winona. If you know anything about country music, you know those names. The Judds were one of the most successful country acts of the 1980s. Naomi and Winona toured, recorded, won Grammys. And Ashley, she was the younger one, the one left behind when the bus pulled out. That's not melodrama. It's just the shape of the household. Her parents had divorced in 1972, when Ashley was 4 years old. Naomi took both daughters back to Kentucky, where Ashley would spend most of her childhood. And when the music career took off, when Naomi and Winona became the Judds and started touring, recording, filling arenas, Ashley was the one who stayed behind. She lived with various relatives. She bounced between homes, between towns. She attended 13 different schools before college. 13. Think about that for a moment. 13 schools means 13 sets of hallways, 13 first days, 13 attempts to figure out where you fit before the ground shifts again. That kind of instability doesn't make you fragile, necessarily. Sometimes it makes you fiercely self-reliant. Sometimes it makes you hungry to build something that is entirely your own. And sometimes, maybe most importantly, it teaches you that you are the only constant in your own life. Everything else moves. You stay. And that matters, because it tells you something about the kind of career Ashley Judd would eventually want. Not her mother's career, not her sister's career. Something separate, something she could point to and say, I did that. Nobody gave it to me. From the very beginning, there was a determination to be understood as an individual rather than as an extension of a famous family. She went to the University of Kentucky, majored in French, minored in anthropology, art history, theater, and women's studies. She was elected to Phi Beta Kappa. She spent a semester studying in France. She was smart, genuinely, rigorously smart, in a way that Hollywood has never quite known what to do with. The kind of person who reads theory for pleasure. The kind of person whose intellectual curiosity would eventually pull her away from the industry that was supposed to be her whole world. After college, she moved to Los Angeles, studied acting with Robert Carnegie at Playhouse West, and worked as a hostess at the Ivy while she waited for her break. She briefly modeled in Japan as a teenager during a school break, an experience that, by her own later account, was far more harrowing than it sounds. But Hollywood was the destination. Hollywood was the plan. It came in stages. In 1991, she appeared in 2 episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation, playing Ensign Robin Leffler. That same year, she landed a recurring role on the NBC Drama Sisters, playing Reed Halsey, the troubled daughter of Swizzy Kurtz's character. She stayed on the show until 1994. It was steady work, visible work, but Judd found the television grind frustrating. She wanted film. She wanted characters she could inhabit completely and then leave behind. In 1992, she took a small part in the Christian Slater comedy Cuffs, notably turning down a larger role in the same film because it required nudity. And then, in 1993, came Ruby in Paradise. Ruby in Paradise is the kind of movie that doesn't make anyone famous in the traditional sense, but it can make a career in a different, deeper way. Directed by Victor Nunez, it tells the story of Ruby Lee Gissing, a young woman who leaves her small Tennessee town for the Florida Panhandle, looking for nothing more dramatic than the chance to figure out who she is. Judd carried the entire film on her shoulders. It won the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance, and the performance announced something that would become both her greatest asset and, arguably, her most complicated problem. Ashley Judd was an actress of real interior depth working in an industry that mostly wanted exterior clarity. What I mean by that is this. Watch Judd and Ruby in Paradise, and you see someone thinking behind her eyes. She doesn't telegraph emotion. She holds it, turns it, lets it land when it's ready. That quality, that thoughtfulness on screen, is exactly what certain directors look for. Michael Mann saw it. He cast her in Heat in 1995 as Charlene Shiherlis, the wife of Val Kilmer's character. It's a supporting role in a film dominated by enormous male performances from Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, but Judd does something remarkable with it. There's a scene near the end of the film where Charlene has to signal to her husband that the police are waiting for him inside their apartment. She steps onto a balcony, and without a word of dialogue, Judd plays an entire marriage, the love, the exhaustion, the fear, the sacrifice, across her face in a matter of seconds. It's the kind of moment that film critics write about for years, and most audiences never noticed, because the film belonged to the men. That tension between what Judd could do and what the market asked her to do would define the next phase of her career. In 1996, she played a supporting role in A Time to Kill, the Joel Schumacher adaptation of the John Grisham novel, alongside Matthew McConaughey and Sandra Bullock. The same year, she played the young Norma Jean Baker in the HBO film Norma Jean in Maryland, opposite Mira Sorvino. That performance earned her a Golden Globe nomination. She was building range, demonstrating versatility. And then the thriller wave hit. Kiss the Girls came in 1997. Judd played Dr. Kate McTiernan, a kidnapping victim who escapes her captor and teams up with a detective played by Morgan Freeman to track him down. The film made over $100 million worldwide. Judd was convincing, compelling, and, this is the word the industry used most often, bankable. 2 years later, Double Jeopardy paired her with Tommy Lee Jones in a high-concept revenge thriller about a woman wrongly convicted of her husband's murder who discovers he's still alive. That film grossed $177 million. It spent 3 weeks at number 1. By 1999, Ashley Judd was, by almost any commercial measure, a leading lady. She was beautiful. She was sharp. She could anchor a thriller. She could hold the screen against actors twice her age and twice her experience. The trajectory seemed obvious. More thrillers, bigger budgets, maybe an Oscar-bait drama in the right year, maybe a franchise. She was doing what very few actresses in that era were doing, carrying films on her own name. And the thing is, she made it look effortless. That was part of her appeal and, maybe, part of her problem. There was no visible strain in Judd's performances. She didn't choose scenery. She didn't signal to the audience that she was working hard. She simply inhabited the role, fully and quietly, and trusted you to keep up. In Double Jeopardy, for instance, she plays a woman who transforms over 6 years in prison, from a naive, trusting wife to someone steeled and singular in her purpose. That arc requires physical and emotional shifts that a lesser performer would oversell. Judd underplays it. She lets the determination accumulate in small gestures, in the way she holds her jaw, in the way she stops asking for permission. That restraint, that refusal to perform the act of performing, is a specific gift. It's the kind of thing that gets you compared to the great screen naturalists. But it's also the kind of thing that can be misread as blankness by an industry that increasingly values volume. But here's where the pattern starts to reveal itself. Look at the roles Judd chose in the early 2000s. Where the Heart is in 2000, a southern drama about a pregnant teenager. Someone Like You in 2001, a romantic comedy. High Crimes in 2002, another thriller with Morgan Freeman. Divine Secrets of the Yea Sisterhood, also in 2002, an ensemble drama about Southern women and generational wounds. And Frida, where she played a small but notable supporting role as Tina Modotti in Julie Taymor's biopic of Frida Kahlo. None of these films are bad. Several are quite good, but they don't add up to the kind of aggressive, narrowly focused career escalation that Hollywood rewards. Judd was ranging. She was following her curiosity. She was choosing material that interested her rather than material designed to consolidate a brand. And the industry noticed. Not with hostility, necessarily. More with confusion. Because Hollywood needs to know what you are. It needs a sentence. She's an action star. She's a romantic lead. She's an Oscar contender. And Ashley Judd kept refusing to be reduced to one sentence. This is not a failure story. I want to be very clear about that. What happened to Ashley Judd's career in the early 2000s was not a collapse. It was a divergence. She was moving in one direction while the industry was moving in another, and neither party was wrong. They were simply misaligned. Consider the context. By the mid-2000s, Hollywood was shifting hard toward franchise filmmaking. Spider-Man arrived in 2002. The Lord of the Rings trilogy was rewriting the economics of the industry. The major studios were consolidating their slates around tentpole properties, sequels, adaptations, anything with built-in brand recognition. The mid-budget adult drama, exactly the kind of film that Judd excelled in, was being squeezed out of the theatrical marketplace. It wasn't disappearing entirely, but it was migrating to cable, to smaller distributors, to the margins. And for actresses specifically, the math was brutal. There were fewer roles for women over 35 that didn't involve being someone's mother, someone's wife, or someone's love interest in a subplot that could be cut without anyone noticing. The smart, self-possessed woman at the center of a grown-up story, the character Judd played better than almost anyone, was becoming an endangered species at the multiplex. That wasn't about Ashley Judd. It was about an entire ecosystem shifting under the feet of a generation of performers. Think about it. How many of the women who were leading adult dramas and thrillers in the late 1990s maintained that exact position into the 2010s? Sandra Bullock managed it, partly by pivoting to comedy and then to prestige. A few others found television. Most simply found that the kinds of films they'd been making no longer existed in the same way. Judd kept working. In 2003, she played Maggie the Cat in the Broadway revival of Tennessee Williams's Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. In 2004, she starred opposite Kevin Kline in DeLovely, a sophisticated Cole Porter biopic, playing his devoted wife Linda. The performance earned her another Golden Globe nomination. Critics praised her restraint, her intelligence, her ability to hold the screen with quiet authority. But the film underperformed commercially, as elegant biopics tend to do. Then came Bug in 2006, directed by William Friedkin. If you've seen it, you remember it. If you haven't, it's a deeply unsettling chamber piece about paranoia, isolation, and two damaged people spiraling into shared delusion. Judd gives one of the most fearless performances of her career. It's raw and exposed and uncomfortable in ways that mainstream audiences tend to avoid. Friedkin asked her to go to a very dark place, and she went there without hesitation. But Bug is not the kind of film that brings you back to the center of the industry. It's the kind of film that earns you the respect of other actors and the admiration of cinephiles. It's a sideways move, not a forward one. And by this point, Judd seemed to be making her peace with Sideways. Around this time, other things were pulling at her attention. She had married Scottish racing driver Dario Franchitti in 2001. She was spending time in Tennessee and Scotland, far from Hollywood's daily rhythms. And she was becoming increasingly serious about humanitarian work. This is where a certain kind of story would lean into speculation, into psychology, into the language of retreat and withdrawal. I'm not going to do that. What I will say is this. Ashley Judd made choices. She looked at what the industry was offering, and she looked at what the world needed, and she chose to split her time. Starting in 2002, she began traveling with NGOs, visiting grassroots programs focused on HIV and AIDS, maternal health, gender violence, and safe drinking water in countries across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Over time, she would visit more than 20 countries, spending time in brothels, refugee camps, hospices, and slums. She met with women and children whose lives bore no resemblance to anything in Hollywood, and rather than treating it as a photo opportunity, she leaned in, she listened, she stayed. In 2010, she earned a master's degree in public administration from the Harvard Kennedy School. Her thesis focused on gender violence, law, and social justice. Her academic work was formally recognized for excellence. That's not something you do on a whim. That's not something you do because your last movie underperformed. That's something you do because you've decided that the questions you're most interested in are bigger than any script. She became a Goodwill ambassador for the United Nations Population Fund. She joined the Leadership Council at the International Center for Research on Women. She sat on advisory boards for organizations fighting sex trafficking in India and beyond. She wrote a memoir, All That Is Bitter and Sweet, which became a New York Times bestseller. The book is not a Hollywood tell-all. It's a record of encounters with the world's most vulnerable people, filtered through a deeply personal lens. These aren't the actions of someone running away from something. They're the actions of someone running towards something else. She continued acting, selectively. She starred in the ABC thriller series, Missing in 2012, playing a former CIA operative searching for her kidnapped son in Europe. The show earned her a Primetime Emmy nomination for Outstanding Lead Actress in a miniseries or movie. She appeared in Olympus Has Fallen in 2013, played a supporting role in the Divergent franchise starting in 2014, and took parts in smaller films like Big Stone Gap and the family-friendly Dolphin Tale movies. The roles were different now. Supporting turns rather than leads. Genre work rather than prestige drama. But look closely, and you'll see the same qualities that were there from the beginning. The intelligence in the eyes, the refusal to condescend to the material, the sense that this person is thinking even when the script doesn't require her to. And then came October 2017. On October 5th, the New York Times published its investigation into Harvey Weinstein. Ashley Judd was the first major actress to go on the record with her name. She described an incident from the late 1990s during the production of Kiss the Girls, when Weinstein invited her to a hotel room under the guise of a business meeting and subjected her to sexual harassment. Her willingness to be named, to put her face and her reputation on the story, helped catalyze what became the global reckoning of the Me Too movement. Time magazine named her one of its Persons of the Year in 2017 as part of the Silence Breakers. I'm going to be careful here, because this is an essay about a career, not about a scandal. But the Weinstein revelation recontextualized something important about Judd's trajectory. In the weeks after the story broke, director Peter Jackson publicly acknowledged that Weinstein had discouraged him from casting Judd and Mira Sorvino in the Lord of the Rings films, describing them as difficult to work with. Jackson said he had believed Weinstein at the time, and only later understood it as retaliation against women who had refused the producer's advances. Judd confirmed it on social media. It was the kind of revelation that lands like a stone in water. The ripples spread outward through everything you thought you knew. Think about what that means. Think about the career that might have been. A role in one of the most successful and beloved film franchises in history, denied not because of talent or availability or even scheduling, but because a powerful man was punishing a woman for saying no. We'll never know how that would have changed things. Would a Lord of the Rings credit have kept her in the center of the industry's attention through the 2000s? Would it have led to other franchise offers, other prestige projects? There's no way to answer that, but it's worth sitting with the thought. It's worth acknowledging that the career we see from the outside was, in part, shaped by a force that was invisible until it wasn't. And that's not unique to Ashley Judd. The Weinstein revelations reframed dozens of careers, dozens of trajectories that had been explained as bad luck, bad timing, or bad choices. How many women were quietly blacklisted? How many doors were closed without explanation? We'll never have a full accounting. But Judd's case is one of the most vivid because the specific role and the specific franchise that was denied to her is so clearly identifiable. Judd filed a defamation lawsuit against Weinstein in 2018, alleging that he had deliberately damaged her career by spreading false information about her after she rejected his advances. Parts of the case wound through the courts for years. In the 2022 film She Said, which dramatized the New York Times investigation, Judd played herself, a surreal and deeply personal act that speaks to her willingness to engage with her own story on her own terms. She stood on a film set and reenacted one of the most consequential decisions of her life, the decision to let her name be printed. In April 2022, Judd lost her mother. Naomi Judd died by suicide at the age of 76. Ashley wrote an op-ed for the New York Times about her mother's death, about grief, about the need for stronger privacy protections for families in crisis. It was measured and aching and precise, which is to say it was written exactly the way Ashley Judd acts. So where does this leave us? What do we make of a career that included Sundance triumphs and $100 million thrillers and a Michael Mann film and a William Friedkin film and Broadway and Harvard and the United Nations? The easy narrative is the one about lost potential. The actress who should have been bigger. The star who was derailed. And there's truth in that, real, material truth, given what we now know about the forces that were working against her. But it's not the whole truth. Because Ashley Judd also chose. She chose complexity over simplicity. She chose engagement over visibility. She chose to be a person in the world rather than just a face on a screen. And those choices cost her something in Hollywood terms. Of course they did. The industry doesn't reward people who leave the room. It barely remembers them. But here's the thing about influence. It doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Judd's willingness to go on the record in 2017 didn't just affect her own story. It changed the landscape for every actress who came after. Intimacy coordinators are now standard on sets. Sexual harassment hotlines exist on union cards. Auditions no longer happen in hotel rooms, or before 8 in the morning, or after 6 at night. These are structural changes. They happened because specific people were willing to put their names on the line, and Ashley Judd was the first. Her screen work, too, has a legacy that operates quietly. The naturalism she brought to those late 90s thrillers, the sense that the woman at the center of the story was a complete person with an interior life, not just a function of the plot. That quality influenced how audiences thought about female leads in genre films. She didn't invent it, but she modeled it consistently, film after film, in roles that could easily have been played as surfaces. Today, Judd continues her work as a goodwill ambassador for the United Nations Population Fund. She speaks publicly about gender violence, reproductive rights, and mental health. She spends part of the year in the Congo, where her partner conducts research on bonobos, our closest living relatives, and a species organized around female coalitions. There's a poetry in that choice of life that feels very deliberate. She writes op-eds. She gives speeches. She shows up at the places where showing up matters more than being seen. She is not someone who disappeared. She is someone who redirected. And the distinction matters, because it tells us something not just about Ashley Judd, but about the kind of careers we value and the kind we overlook. Hollywood has always been better at recognizing people who stay in the center of the frame. The ones who step to the side, who use their platform for something other than accumulating more platform, tend to get narrated as cautionary tales. They become whatever happened to stories. And Ashley Judd is not a whatever happened to story. She's a woman who was given a particular set of tools: beauty, intellect, emotional precision, a famous name she didn't choose, and used them in ways that don't fit neatly into a 3-act structure. She peaked commercially in the late 1990s, but the word peaked implies a decline, and what followed wasn't a decline. It was an expansion, a widening of the lens, a decision that the frame could be bigger than any screen. That's not a mystery. That's just a life. One lived more intentionally than most of us are willing to attempt. If this gave you something to think about, leave a comment below. I'd like to hear your thoughts. And if you'd like to see more of these, subscribe. Thanks for watching.